And now, a new piece of footage has surfaced, potentially holding a fresh clue. Approximately 2 miles from Guthrie's Arizona home, a doorbell camera captured the images of several vehicles moving through the neighborhood on the very night she disappeared. The case against Nancy Guthrie's son-in-law, the reason he became the prime suspect in her abduction, comes down to a single piece of FBI footage video that was never supposed to see the light of day. In the footage, a federal agent is seen playing a recording of a traced phone call from 2:47 in the morning. Suddenly, the room is filled with the son-in-law's own voice, discussing Nancy's kidnapping with details so intimate, only the planner would know them. The color vanishes from his face, a change so rapid the camera captures it instantly. The perpetrators have probably destroyed their clothes. They've disposed of the vehicle. But what they can't eliminate is the digital footprint video evidence from a neighbor's home just a couple of miles away. It's good, solid evidence. And from 6 feet away, his hands begin to tremble. And just like that, every lie he had told for the last 90 minutes evaporates in 4 seconds flat. But the phone call was not the most damning piece of evidence investigators had found. The text messages were worse. His laptop searches were even more disturbing. And what federal agents uncovered about his finances would solidify a family member as the most damning suspect in the entire investigation. This is what was revealed during 6 hours inside that room. The footage opens. It's cold. 5:30 in the morning. The son-in-law is escorted into a bare FBI interview room. He is still wearing the pajamas from an hour earlier, when a SWAT team smashed through his front door with a battering ram. His hair is uncombed. His eyes are puffy, but he is already putting on a performance, projecting a sense of manufactured disbelief. He blinks under the harsh fluorescent lights, the perfect image of a man who cannot comprehend why federal agents just tore him from his sleep. But this isn't panic, it's an act. 2 agents take their seats across from him. The lead interrogator is Special Agent Russell Dante, a 23-year veteran of the FBI's Violent Crimes Division. He's the specialist they call in to dismantle suspects who believe they are the smartest person in the room. His partner, a younger agent, will barely utter a word for the next 6 hours. But his pen is in constant motion, documenting every word, every flinch in real time. And this is the critical moment. Agent Dante begins to read the Miranda warning, and the son-in-law waves it away as if it's a minor procedural annoyance. He doesn't hesitate, declining an attorney with the cool arrogance of a man who has already concluded he can outsmart 2 federal investigators and walk free before noon. That one decision, made in under 3 seconds, would ultimately dismantle his entire life. His opening performance is flawless. I have absolutely no idea why I'm here. This is insane. I would never hurt Nancy. She's my mother-in-law. I love her like my own mother. His hands are flat on the table, his eye contact unwavering. Each word delivered as if from a script. It's clear he had prepared for the possibility of this moment. But here's the crucial fact. He had prepared for questions. He had not prepared for Russell Dante. When the agents ask him to recount the evening Nancy disappeared, he begins his rehearsed narrative. He delivers his account with the kind of rigid consistency that only comes from repetition. Nancy had been over for dinner at his and his wife Annie's home. They played card games, which Nancy loved. She was, by his account, in great spirits. At around 9:45, he says he volunteered to drive her home because it was dark. He recounts walking Nancy to her front door, listening for the click of the lock, and then driving directly home. He includes specific, granular details to lend his story credibility. What Nancy wore, the food she ate, the sound of her laugh as she told a story about her late husband during dessert. But that final detail is more significant than anyone could imagine. It means that the last evening Nancy Guthrie experienced as a free woman was spent laughing at her own dinner table, surrounded by the family she trusted without question, which included the very man now sitting across from Agent Dante. For 90 uninterrupted minutes, the son-in-law maintains perfect composure, fielding every question without a moment's pause. He even questions the agents about the progress of the investigation, playing the part of a concerned relative eager to assist, not the man who orchestrated her abduction. And Agent Dante lets him. He lets him repeat his story. He allows him to become more confident with every retelling. Because Dante is no longer collecting information, he was constructing a trap. He was giving this man every chance to commit himself to a version of events that was about to be completely obliterated. But that rehearsed timeline was just the quiet before the true interrogation began. What Agent Dante had waited 90 minutes to reveal would change everything in less than 4 seconds. The foundation of the suspect's carefully constructed narrative was about to fracture. What the agents did next would make that 90-minute performance utterly worthless. 90 minutes into the interview, the time had come for the phone call. The son-in-law is leaning back in his chair, seemingly relaxed, delivering his third retelling of the story with an increasing air of confidence. Without breaking eye contact with the suspect, Agent Dante signals his partner. The younger agent retrieves a laptop and audio equipment, placing them on the table with no explanation. And just like that, the temperature in the room seems to drop. The warmth evaporates from Dante's voice. He leans in, his voice low and precise, and delivers 7 words. "I want you to listen very carefully." Across the table, the son-in-law registers a flash of mild curiosity, perhaps even amusement. That expression holds for the precise duration it takes for the room to fill with the sound of his own voice. What he is hearing is a traced phone call, made from a burner phone to his personal cell at 2:47 in the morning. The conversation details NY's deteriorating condition, the failed ransom attempt, and the next steps. The son-in-law's voice on that recording is not similar. It is not ambiguous. It is him discussing logistics. It is him referencing intimate details of NY's captivity that only the person orchestrating the entire event would know. And the surveillance camera captured what happened next. The blood drains from the son-in-law's face in real time. His hands, which had rested steady on that table for over an hour, begin to tremble, a tremor so violent the camera picks it up from 6 feet away. His entire body recoils, the confident posture completely gone. His eyes dart frantically between Dante and the second agent, searching for an escape that isn't there. The recording clicks off, plunging the room into a heavy, dead silence. 3 seconds pass. 5, 7. Agent Dante allows the silence to become a physical presence, a crushing weight pressing down on him. Then Dante breaks it. "That's your voice, isn't it?" The denial is reflexive. "That doesn't sound like me," but his voice cracks on the word me. Every syllable is a betrayal. He knows. They know. The unblinking eye of the camera knows. But Dante is not finished. He plays the recording again, this time pausing at specific, damning moments, isolating statements that prove direct coordination with NY's captor. Each pause is a surgical incision. The son-in-law's breathing turns shallow and rapid. The rehearsed calm is gone, replaced by darting eyes and involuntary swallowing. This is pure survival mode. He pivots, scrambling for any plausible explanation. The call was about something else, he insists. A business matter. It was a private situation with his cousin, Marcus, that investigators are misconstruing. Agent Dante allows the lie to hang in the air, just long enough for a flicker of false hope to ignite in the man's eyes. The younger agent glances at Dante, whose jaw tightens almost imperceptibly. It is the only visible reaction from a man who has interrogated killers for 2 decades. He gives a subtle nod toward the folder, and this is where the interrogation descends into something far darker, because what the agents produced from that folder made the phone call seem like a warm-up. The text messages. The second agent drops a thick folder onto the table with a thud that echoes in the silent room. Inside are printouts of every single text message exchanged between the son-in-law's phone and his cousin Marcus's phone. They span the 3 weeks leading up to Nancy's disappearance, right through the night she was taken. Agent Dante begins to read them aloud, his voice slow and deliberate, sliding each printed page across the table, so the son-in-law is forced to see his own words staring back at him in black ink. Thursday night works best. Her routine is predictable. You'll need to disable the doorbell camera first thing. I'll tell you exactly where it is. The back door is the weak point. Front door has too much security. She takes sleeping pills around 10 p.m. Give it an hour after that. The camera captures the man's face, telling the entire story. It is the slow, sickening realization that every digital breadcrumb he left while planning this crime has been found and is now being read back to him in a federal building. These are not vague messages that are open to interpretation. They reference NY's specific schedule, the layout of her home, her window of vulnerability, even her medication. The woman who had laughed with him at dinner, who had trusted this man, was reduced to a target profile in his own text messages. He tries a new tactic. His phone was hacked, he claims. Someone else sent those messages to frame him. Agent Dante doesn't even blink. Cell tower records place his phone at locations that perfectly match his own verified whereabouts at the time each message was sent. His workplace, his home, restaurants where credit card receipts confirm he was present. The timestamps align perfectly with his daily life, a pattern physically impossible for a remote hacker to replicate. He pivots again. Marcus must have fabricated the messages, spoofed them somehow. That story crumbles instantly. The messages are confirmed on Marcus's phone, on the carrier's servers, on the son-in-law's own device, and in his cloud backups. Confirmed, authentic, unaltered, 4 independent sources, all matching perfectly. The footage shows him sinking deeper into his chair with each failed explanation. The man who strode into this room no longer exists. But that wasn't the end of it. What investigators found on his laptop would make the phone call, the text messages, and all the lies seem like a simple prologue: the laptop. This is where his own arrogance sealed his fate. He believed he was smart enough to cover his digital tracks. 3 days before his arrest, he ran a commercial data wiping program on his machine, targeting the internet history files. He thought he had erased everything. The FBI's digital forensic specialists recovered it all. Every search term, every web query, every digital footprint he left behind. Agent Dante began to read the recovered data out loud. His voice, devoid of emotion, recited the findings from a printed forensics report. It was clinical, detached. Across the table, the junior agent's pen, which had been scratching non-stop for 4 hours, went still. He simply stared down at the polished surface of the table. The first search term: how to abduct a person without a trace. Then came queries on anonymous Bitcoin for ransom. And a chilling question: how long could an elderly person survive without their prescription medication? He researched methods for disposing of a body in arid, remote locations. He looked up sentencing guidelines, comparing the penalties for kidnapping versus murder. But the next entry was what truly sent a chill through the room. The most damning search of all was executed 72 hours before Nancy vanished. It was a question about legal precedent. Do accomplices get lighter sentences if a captive dies? This was never just about a kidnapping. He was building a contingency plan for a scenario where Nancy did not survive the ordeal, a possibility that may have been the intention all along. The timeline itself told a story. Over a period of 3 weeks, the searches evolved from abstract curiosity to meticulous operational planning. He looked into disabling modern doorbell cameras and circumventing home security systems. He explored how to hire accomplices for cash. Every one of these queries originated from the same device where investigators also found searches for Nancy's specific medications, her daily schedule, and the model of her home alarm. The son-in-law's defense? He claimed it was all research for a crime novel he was writing. Agent Dante dismissed the claim without a moment's hesitation. There were no manuscript files on his laptop, no notes, no outlines. Not a single fragment of data suggested a creative writing project of any kind had ever been conceived on that computer. It was then that the son-in-law attempted to invoke his Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. But it was far too late. 3 hours of recorded denials and contradictions were already captured, preserved by the interview room camera. The damage was irreversible, and the evidence was not yet done with him, because the financial records agents were about to present didn't just illuminate how he could have planned the abduction. They explained why he was desperate enough to orchestrate it. 3 hours into the interrogation, investigators pivoted to motive, following the money trail. And the picture they painted was of a man in so deep, he had come to believe that destroying the life of an 84-year-old woman was his only path to survival. It began with his bank statements. His checking account was overdrawn by thousands, deep into the red, the kind of negative balance that triggers concerned calls from the bank. But that wasn't the half of it. It was only the beginning. His credit cards were pushed to their limits, payments were months in arrears, and collection agencies were closing in. And from there, it only got worse. His mortgage was in default. A foreclosure notice was pending within 60 days. The very house where Nancy had sat at his table, laughing with her family. He was on the verge of losing everything. In total, his combined debt exceeded $250,000, pitted against an income that could barely cover his monthly essentials. He wasn't simply broke. He was suffocating under the weight of it. And then there was this. Investigators uncovered $30,000 in unaccounted-for cash withdrawals made in the 3 weeks leading up to Nancy's disappearance. When questioned about the money, the son-in-law's story was like shifting sand. First, he claimed they were for business expenses, then for home repairs. Finally, just a vacant stare, followed by an admission that he couldn't recall. $30,000 vanished. But even that wasn't the true motive. This next piece of the puzzle is where the entire picture snaps into focus. Nancy's existing will stipulated that her multi-million-dollar estate was to be divided equally between her two daughters. If Nancy were to die before that document was altered, his wife, Annie, stood to inherit roughly $2 million assets that would be considered marital property, shared with her husband. Every debt would be cleared, every financial pressure relieved, with a single check from the estate. And this is where we find the ticking clock. Nancy had already booked an appointment with her lawyer to sign a newly revised will, a will that would drastically diminish Annie's inheritance. That appointment was mere days away, a fact the son-in-law was fully aware of. Investigators confirmed he had overheard Nancy discussing the planned changes during a family dinner, the same dinner where she had laughed while telling stories of her late husband, the same dinner where she proudly showed everyone the framed photograph of her grandchildren she carried in her purse, and the very same dinner where she trusted this man to see her safely home. He wasn't just facing financial ruin, he was watching a $2 million lifeline evaporate before his eyes. And time was running out. But the money trail only answered the question of why. What came next would reveal the how, and it began with the complete and total collapse of the son-in-law's composure. The breaking point came 4.5 hours in. The leaked interrogation video shows a man physically coming apart. His posture is slumped, his hands tremble uncontrollably. The veneer of confident innocence he wore in the first hour had vanished. Agent Dante, sensing the fracture, changed his tactics entirely. The relentless, confrontational pressure evaporated, replaced by something more disarming and infinitely more dangerous. After hours of hammering him with evidence, Dante transformed into an understanding confidant. His voice lowered. "Look," he began, "I've been doing this for 23 years. I've seen a lot of people find themselves in a situation like yours. Things start out one way," he continued, "and then they spiral into something you never intended. Maybe all you wanted was to scare Nancy, get her to rethink changing the will. Perhaps you imagined Marcus would keep her for a day, maybe two, before letting her go. The thing simply spiraled. That can happen." Then, Agent Dante shifts forward. But the reality, right now, is that Nancy is out there. An 84-year-old woman. She is without her heart medication. She is without her blood pressure medication. In her purse, the one she always carries, is a framed photograph of her grandchildren, and she is completely alone. You can end that suffering right now, in this room. And this is where the facade shatters. For the first time in 4.5 hours, tears well up in the son-in-law's eyes. Then comes the first real concession. It's small, but the admission is seismic. "I knew Marcus was having money trouble. I lent him some cash to get by." "How much?" "Maybe $20,000. Now, this is the pivot point. That single admission invalidated everything he had maintained for the preceding 3 hours. He had sworn he couldn't recall the destination of those cash withdrawals. Now he's confirming that $20,000 went straight to the man who physically abducted Nancy. The financial tether between the architect of the crime and his accomplice was established in his own words. That fracture in his story was about to become a complete structural collapse. With absolute denial no longer an option, the son-in-law deployed his final strategy: concede a connection to Marcus, but paint him as a rogue element. The narrative was that Marcus was desperate, volatile, and must have concocted the kidnapping himself using details he'd overheard during family functions. Agent Dante let him construct this version of events for several minutes. He nodded, took notes, and gave every impression that the story was being seriously considered before he demolished it with one sentence. "We have Marcus in an interview room down the hall, and he is telling us something profoundly different." For the second time that morning, the blood drained from the son-in-law's face. Marcus claims the son-in-law came to him with a proposal, diagrammed the entire operation, the timeline, the entry point, the exact moment Nancy would be most defenseless. He promised Marcus $50,000 to abduct her and keep her until she either died without her medication or a ransom was paid. Marcus furnished details: the restaurant where the plan was finalized, the parking lot where the first cash payment was made. He provided instructions about Nancy's home that he could not possibly have known unless the son-in-law had told him. He even knew which sleeping medication Nancy took and what time she took it. Here's the critical detail. That is not the kind of information a person gleans from casual family chatter. That is operational intelligence, and a common flaw among criminals is the automatic assumption of loyalty between conspirators. It's an assumption that is almost always proven wrong when federal charges enter the equation. Once Marcus grasped that he was facing decades in a federal prison, not a state facility, Any loyalty he felt evaporated in a matter of hours. Self-preservation won. It always does. Corroborating evidence began to accumulate. Surveillance footage captured the two men meeting at a diner days before Nancy went missing. Witness statements came from staff who overheard them discussing a job. Financial trails proved payments well beyond the $30,000 he had already delivered. Completely cornered, the son-in-law attempted one final, desperate maneuver. The talks about kidnapping, he claimed, were all hypothetical. He might have shared details of Nancy's routine, but he never explicitly ordered Marcus to take her. Agent Dante simply pointed to the phone log showing a call at 2:47 a.m. A man genuinely surprised by a crime doesn't accept a call from the perpetrator to discuss the victim's physical state. He doesn't troubleshoot the logistics of a failed ransom. He doesn't ask what should be done with an 84-year-old woman who is running out of time. The recording captures the precise moment the son-in-law comprehends that no scenario he can invent will end with him walking free. Every lie was on record, every pivot documented, and in another room down the hall, Marcus was filling in every blank that the physical evidence could not. 6 hours. That's all the time it took for a man who saw himself as untouchable to completely disintegrate under the pressure of his own fabrications. But the single most unsettling element of this entire encounter is not the physical evidence. It isn't the search warrants, it's not the phone call. Across 6 hours, with dozens of opportunities to do so, the son-in-law never once showed any authentic concern for Nancy. Not once. Every tear he shed was for himself. Every display of emotion was about his own consequences, his own future, his own collapsing world. Nancy Guthrie, 84 years old. The woman who was laughing at her own dinner table the night she was taken. The woman who carried a framed picture of her grandchildren in her purse wherever she went. To the man she trusted to see her home safely, she was nothing more than a number. The account Marcus gave agents of those first 48 hours after Nancy's abduction left hardened investigators at a loss for words. Subscribe now, because that interrogation footage is coming next. And the question consuming everyone in that building was whether Nancy Guthrie was still alive. When they finally located her, the story of Nancy Guthrie is more than a chilling police procedural. It is a haunting mirror held up to the darkest corners of the human heart. At its core, this tragedy serves as a profound warning about the fragility of trust and the toxicity of greed. Nancy wasn't just a target profile or a line item in a financial ledger. She was a woman who shared her laughter and her home, believing that the people sitting across from her dinner table were her sanctuary. The most devastating betrayal isn't found in the $2 million inheritance or the forensic reports, but in the cold calculation of a family member who looked into her eyes while planning her disappearance. This is a reminder that in our digital age, there is no such thing as a hidden shadow. Our choices, every text, every search, every desperate late-night call become an indelible part of our legacy. But the deeper lesson is this: greed is a debt that can never be paid off. When we value a price tag over a human life, we don't just lose our freedom, we lose our humanity. Let us honor Nancy by remembering that the most valuable inheritance we can leave behind isn't a bank balance. It's the integrity of our character and the safety we provide to those who trust us most. Because in the end, the truth always surfaces, but a broken heart can rarely be mended.